Hey, hey, um, good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah. So we decided to collab on an article and I guess a podcast based upon um, four words that were used in a LinkedIn post. I think it was last week or something. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know. You want to kick it off? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, we're kind of, I guess, trying to figure out what phase of the hype cycle we're in with this AI thing.
Mm,
Yeah. So I think the idea was that there's a lot of excitement about it, but how much of it is actually something that we can turn into production quality work? And I think that's where the questions are coming out.
yeah. So I think it felt like 2023 was really sort of the year of imagination and sort of the year of make believe. If you're to follow kind of Mister Rogers' um, old child TV show, but now we're in the land of trying to I guess like, to put it bluntly, fuck around and find out
Mhm.
what this stuff can do. And I think that we both have some pretty strong opinions on this. Why don't you? Yeah, what are your thoughts? Where do you think we are in the hype cycle? Um, and everything else on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I feel I don't know how much higher it can go, but I feel like we're probably at like the peak. Maybe I don't know. I'm sure it could still go further, but it just kind of feels like the I don't know. I don't know if optimism is the right word, but like the lack of skepticism by a lot of businesses on
Hmm.
AI is like kind of, I guess, surprising and shocking. I think as data people, we're taught to be skeptical about things, and I think a lot of the business folk are really just kind of like latching onto these things and saying like, oh my God, look at all these things it can do. But I think with our training, and we're the ones who are asking, where does this actually go? Like, is it actually reliable? When you start poking holes in it,
Hmm.
I kind of feel like that's where you're seeing the edges of it. Yeah. So in my opinion, I kind of feel like a lot of data tools, especially, are just kind of throwing AI into everything and not really asking, what should we actually be using this for? Where is the actual value that we're getting out of it?
Hmm. That is interesting. I think that last time I saw you, we were at Snowflake Summit, and it felt like every vendor had some sort of AI uh, magic to it. But then I don't know about you, but it felt like it's all table stakes at this point. Like if you don't have AI, and I'll put this in air quotes because I'm not quite sure what that means in the context of uh, a lot of things. But if you're not doing it, then it's sort of you're sort of risking looking a bit irrelevant as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think is sort of the general thinking. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I wrote on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. Like it felt like Snowflake the vendors I could really divide distinctly into two discussions that I was having. One was like AI is awesome and it's going to change everything. And then the other one's yeah, we just have to put this in our product because it's
Right.
an expectation, but we think it's actually a toy. And I think it was pretty evenly split, maybe more on the latter side. But I don't know what did you see there?
Yeah, I agree. I probably didn't get to talk to quite as many folks as I wanted to ask that question specifically, but I do think
Mm,
that if you go and just look at some of even the marketing that's out there, there's definitely a lot of marketing that's like extremely bullish, but it's very vague. It's like, our AI tool can do this, and it's like, okay, well, what does that actually mean? Like, how are you different? Like, if this is just table stakes, why is this a competitive differentiator for your
mm,
tool versus anybody else? So yeah, I mean, I think the tools that are more in the camp of we just have to add it because we have to is probably I don't know if that's necessarily like the right opinion, but it's probably the more skeptical opinion that hopefully either side is focused on an actual use case instead of just adding AI. And I don't really know if I've seen that.
yeah, what are some of the use cases that you're seeing? Like, what are some how is it being pitched?
I mean, at least on in some of the more governance side of tools, it's more, okay, it can help us do documentation, or it can. I've even seen like it can replace data analysts, which is
Mm,
a little bit wild to be able to claim that. But then when you see the product demos and you see the questions that are being asked, you can kind of tell like the data sets are very clean. The demo data sets probably don't have much real world issues in them, as we know data is never as clean as it is in a demo. And then the questions are not necessarily things that business folks would actually be asking. And again, it's like, is this built for a business person or is it built for a data person? And I don't know that
mm.
that is always as clear as it should be.
What's an example of a question that's that you're referring to?
Yeah, there's, I mean, I was just looking at a demo earlier where someone's asking like, what are the top products that were profitable in this year? And it's like, okay, great. Like that's not that useful. It's not that interesting. Or what's the correlation between the number of users that we have in this platform versus, how often people log in? It's like, that's not a question that the business is going to ask. Like those things are, in my opinion, not super insightful. And that's not really what data teams are actually doing. So to me, I
Right.
think I agree with you on it feels like a toy. It feels like just something that people are slapping in, and it's not necessarily built where most products would be built with a user story or use case. And I think in
Hmm.
this case, it's more of just an ad hoc, like we all have to throw ChatGPT into our product now.
Well, you do. So,
Yeah.
but it is interesting too. Like I've demoed quite a few of these, I guess now kind of chat bot search based BI products, and the thing that I find really interesting about them is it's like you can ask the business can ask any question they want of the data, and I'm like that's cool, but the business has also likely had access to reports
Yeah.
that answer a lot of business questions, and they don't really get used.
Right.
And so I'm kind of like, well, do you because I now have a way of I guess hypothetically asking any question, does that mean that suddenly my desire for knowledge about my business will just be reinvigorated like a bad marriage? And so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like it's like I don't know. It seems like I remember somebody showed me a product like, but you can anyone can ask any question they want of the business, and I'm like, I don't think they do that already. So like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, half of the businesses out there, at least ones that I've worked for, like haven't even figured out what their metrics are, like their company metrics of like what are the most important metrics for a business? How are they all interrelated? If this one changes, what does that mean? What should we do? Like if that isn't figured out, then the stakeholders don't even know what questions to be asking of data. And I think those
mm,
are still fundamental things that aren't figured out first. And to me, all of this AI stuff just kind of feels like another distractor that is just going to mean that we're not working on more important problems like those ones.
so what would you recommend then? I guess to teams or I guess quote the business in terms of figuring out those metrics. Would AI be able to? Could AI just do that for you, like figure out the metrics for you and just do that? Or
I think I've seen a couple conference presentations about this, how AI can support that workflow. And
interesting.
I think that's the keyword support. I do think that there is a place for AI to maybe help you brainstorm things like this and give you
Mm,
examples. And if it's coming from a list of, I know Abby Sivasalam's working on like, at Lever Labs, he's working on a list of, here's all the metrics that are common for all of these different business models. If AI has access to something like that, maybe that just makes that process easier. But I
mm,
don't think it takes the work out of the human side of things. It's not like the company's just going to get a list of metrics and then everything's built for you and it's all just figured out. I think that's still almost more like the strategic work, in my opinion.
mm-hmm. And I guess the hypothetical is even if the metrics were all just provided for you, it's like, what do you even know what action to take based on those metrics, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other part of it. Is what I often see is a business will even if you have metrics,
Yeah.
um, it's almost like metric blindness. It's in some ways where
Yeah.
you're kind of like,
Yeah.
you'll cherry pick the ones you want to go for, and then I guess just take those.
Yeah. And then
So
argue with the ones that you don't agree with because the numbers don't say what you want.
yeah, like the correlation of like user activity and clicks like that. I don't agree with that. I'm not going to look at it. That's interesting. And I think the other component of this that we're talking about too is the state of a lot of companies' underlying data sets.
Mhm.
And so the question I like to always ask when I'm speaking is when I the question I ask the audience is, would you throw an LLM on top of your core company data sets today? And if you do, are you willing to risk your job if it blows up on you?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
nobody raises their hand. Surprisingly enough, it's weird. I'm
Yeah.
disappointed.
Well, and I think even that, like, I think there's, a lot of this talk of like, oh, if we don't have data quality, then we can't use AI. And so now everyone's running to data quality as the next big thing. And I think that's still important, but data is a constantly evolving and ever changing resource. And so even if you might get all of your data quality good in one state, sure, you can talk about data contracts and all these other things, but like that state can always change. And those things are always a little unpredictable.
Hmm.
And then even on that side of things, like LLMs and generative AI, the outputs are, at least right now, non-deterministic. Like you could get different results every time you ask the same question. And so is that
Hmm.
really the type of thing that a data team should be pushing forward, or like if anything, we want to swing the pendulum back towards governance and having things be a little bit more well controlled versus it just being kind of like different every time that you run a prompt.
They could be. I often kind of joke that you're going to start doing prompt reviews. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's an interesting time that we're in because it's like I feel like we haven't really, as an industry, solved a lot of the underlying issues. Like BI is still a huge challenge for a lot of companies, but now you want to throw something else on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll work. Maybe maybe we're stupid. I don't know. It's entirely possible. It's probably very likely, actually. I'm kidding. But it is an interesting time because I feel like there's a couple of threads. One of them is there's a new panacea that's going to make things a lot better in ways that we simply haven't been able to figure out before, and that's entirely possible. Like I think in some ways, AI may be the thing that actually helps data management scale past its just because the sheer amount of data that's being generated right now and use cases is more complex. So maybe it could help there. I think, as you point out, it's more of an assistant. It's not going to
Right.
solve it for you. But it's still interesting because I feel like we keep dodging a lot of the central issues of why I guess working with data has always been really difficult.
Right. Yeah.
And so and you keep punting on those issues, and so I guess, and I always say too, like if you're not going to fix the problems with your data now, like what other opportunity are you going to get when
Yeah.
all the attention and money is on this right now? So,
Yeah. Precisely.
like,
Yeah. It's kind of like a denial of like the root cause issue. It's like the underlying problems are still the underlying problems. We're just adding more noise to the system now to make it even more complicated.
do you think there's any metrics or any measurements that you would include? Um, I guess as sort of an assist to help maybe improve the use of AI in business workflows.
It's a good question. I definitely don't have one figured out. I'm sure that there's people out there trying to figure that out now, but I think to be able to
Yeah.
like reduce everything, all of the factors that go into data quality and data documentation to one number is pretty tough to do
Mm,
because every single company, there's so much nuance about the data that a company has and the vast size of it and all those different things. Like I feel like reducing it to one number is, I don't think it's impossible, but it's probably pretty difficult to do and
what
definitely,
about five numbers, Lindsay?
yeah, maybe, I don't know. Five numbers that roll up into one metric. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
all the power to whoever's trying to figure that out. But
it is interesting. Yeah, yeah. Because I just don't know how. Yeah, part of me wonders like what does successful AI look like at the end of
right,
the day?
yeah,
So versus and what is unsuccessful? Like we're talking. I think we're kind of taking a bit of a I wouldn't say a cynic's view, but pretty close to it. But like, what does failure look like? So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think eventually we get to a place where we don't even know that we're interacting with it, and that
yep.
it's doing a good enough job that you can't even tell it's there anymore. And I think we already have examples of that in machine learning, right? Like sometimes recommendation engines and things like that that are, they've been around for so long and they just work, and we don't really question them anymore. I'm sure that is probably the end state, but I think we're pretty far off from that. Definitely, at least in the data space.
Well, yeah. I mean,
From
you
what
have
I've
an
seen.
iPhone too, and whatnot. It's
Yeah,
like they're pretty good.
yeah,
There's a lot of machine learning behind these, right? And
yeah,
we're recording this in Riverside, and there's a lot of ML behind that. So, but you don't know it's there; it just works. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When you get to that state where it just sort of does its thing, you don't even know that's going to be
right.
awesome. So, any other thoughts on this topic? I guess where do you want the industry to go? What's the
Yeah. I mean, I think an ideal state would be to have the use cases figured out first and like have the value
mm,
story figured out first and then apply AI as a solution to the problem rather than trying to figure out the problems that AI can solve. Like it kind of feels like a backwards way of going about product development. And I think at this point it just is it's going to drive a lot of data tools into all just parity in terms of
mm,
like features that AI provide, and to me it feels like a distraction. So I would like to see data vendors and companies still focusing on the important things that need to be solved and the problems that we were focused on. That I feel like now AI is kind of driving some of that away. And I guess for the data practitioners, like, be skeptical, ask questions, ask the hard questions when someone's trying to sell you their new AI tool and they say that it can do everything and anything, because odds are that is probably marketing talk.
I love it. You don't mince words. It's good. That's why I'm writing an article on this. So yeah, well, cool. Yeah, I think good discussion. Hopefully, audience, check out our article
Yeah.
because it's awesome, just like you and everybody else. So yeah. Well, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for, I guess, commenting and prompting
Yeah.
a quick collaboration.
A
So yeah,
rant article, we'll call it that.
it's a rant article. Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are the best ones. So
Yeah.
awesome, awesome.
Awesome.
Well, have a good one.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Bye.